What's up, guys? You're watching the Fantasy Goods, and I'm going to be giving you Week 11 injury reports and waiver wire claims, so make sure you stay tuned because it's coming up next. Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Goods. I'm Joshua Lipinski, McHale, and like I said in the intro, I'm going to be giving you Week 11 injury report and waiver wire claims. So as always, before I get into it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to leave me a comment when you guys are done watching. Let's hop right into it here. This IR list for the season seems like it's getting longer and longer, but possibly getting shorter this week finally. You have Sony Michel and Zach Ertz who are eligible to return from IR, designated for return this week. So you're going to have to watch their availability because they do have a 21-day window where they have to activate them, but they might not be available quite yet. So pay attention to it. Next, you got Austin Eckler and Raheem Mostert, both not coming back this week, but are possible to be back for Week 12. And speaking of 49ers running backs, JaMycal Hasty, a new name going on the IR. He is effectively done for this season after breaking his collarbone on Sunday and can pretty much be dropped. You don't need him. He's not going to be back this season before the championship. And to be honest with you, he really wasn't doing much with the carries he was getting anyway. So, I mean, another hit to the San Francisco 49ers, but, what else is new this season? Another backup who's gone down, Justin Jackson, has been placed on IR. He's possible to come back Week 13, battling a knee injury right now. But the guy to pick up is Kalen Ballage, if you guys have been paying attention. And I'll get into that a little later in my waiver wire claims. And then just touching on the 49ers one more time, Jimmy Garoppolo was placed on IR, designated for return last week, but I think he's done for the year, guys. Kyle Shanahan's most recent interview, he pretty much said Garoppolo is going to be the starter in 2021. So if the head coach is looking ahead into next season, you can pretty much forget about his possibilities for returning in 2020. Next, we got Gaskins, Edelman, and Jackson still on IR. David Johnson was placed on IR last week with a concussion, so he can't return till Week 13 at the earliest. And here we go, guys. CMC out again already for Week 11. I told you guys last week, there was a possibility he could play this week or next week, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Panthers held him till after their Week 13 bye with how good they've been playing. And if they don't have Bridgewater this week, why are you going to push him back? I just don't see it. He's your star player. I think that you're going to have to hold on to CMC on your IR spot until Week 14. But that's just me. You're going to have to pay attention. But he's out this week again. Another big name that's out is Drew Brees. He got hurt last week after getting hit. He was on the sideline. Looked like he might come back in. Was still dressed. Nope. He wound up having a collapsed lung and multiple rib fractures on both sides of his rib cage. In interviews, they said he's a couple weeks away from starting and being back. He said like 2 weeks. Now look, I'm no doctor, but a guy in his 40s recovering from a collapsed lung and a couple of broken ribs, I think that's going to take a little longer than 2 weeks. So I'm erring on the side of caution here and expecting him to be out 3 to 4 rather than the 2 that they're claiming right now. But you never know. They got the best doctors in the world working on these guys. So just pay attention to that, but don't worry about it this week. He's out. The guy to definitely go get is Jameis Winston. Next, you got David Montgomery, who's still labeled as out with a concussion, but he's possible to come back this week if he clears that protocol because unlike the Texans, they didn't put Montgomery on IR. Now, some good news, we got Calvin Ridley, who's coming off his bye, and he's questionable for this week, but he did get in a limited practice and was running ahead of that limited practice. So like on Monday and Tuesday, they had him running. He looked good with his foot, and obviously he was in individual limited practice this Wednesday. So his outlook for this week is on the positive side, but he still holds that questionable tag. So pay attention because if he winds up missing a practice and taking a step back this week, that's bad news for us Calvin Ridley owners. And speaking of bad news, Joe Mixon still week to week with this foot injury he's been dealing with, and he missed another practice on Wednesday. So if you drop Giovanni Bernard, you're a fool, but you need to go out and get him. He's been doing great, even though he kind of slipped off last week. But Joe Mixon is still a hard questionable tag for if he's going to play in Week 11. And now we got Devontae Adams, who's also drawing a questionable tag with that lingering ankle injury. He missed practice this Wednesday, so you're going to have to monitor that because if he re-aggravates that, he's going to miss some more time, guys. And the guy to go have right now would definitely be MVS, Marcus Valdes-Scantling, especially after his last 2 weeks where he's done pretty good. And Alan Lazard's still not officially back yet. And they're saying if he does play this week, he's probably going to be on a limited snap count. Next, you got James Robinson popping up on the injury report with a shoulder injury. But, I mean, he did have a limited practice on Wednesday, so his outlook is positive for playing and suiting up Week 11 versus Pittsburgh. As positive as that can be. We got Tyler Lockett, also questionable with a knee injury, but Pete Carroll came out in an interview and said that he will be playing this week in Week 11. I mean, it's a big game versus Arizona, and you know they want to get back at them for beating them in overtime last time out. So they're going to try and get every weapon they can. Chris Carson looking like he might miss this week, still dealing with that foot injury. I'd go out and get either Carlos Hyde or DJ Dallas. Now, I'm leaning a little more towards Carlos Hyde over DJ Dallas because DJ Dallas was getting majority of the carries because Hyde was injured and dealing with a hamstring injury. But with Hyde back, I think that he's going to be the guy to have in this backfield while Carson's out. Kenny Golladay showed up for a full practice on Wednesday, so that's great news. He might be back from that hip injury this week. But on the other end of that, you got Marvin Jones Jr. now dealing with a knee injury. He's had nagging knee problems pretty much his entire career, so they could have just given him a rest day. But you're going to have to pay attention to that if you got Marvin Jones Jr. Or, handcuffed him to replace what you lost in Golladay. I mean, you're just going to have to pay attention to what's going on with his Lions receiving core. Speaking of handcuffs, Duke Johnson Jr. missed practice on Wednesday due to a non-COVID illness. So, I mean, I'm going to guess he'll be back this week. If he's just got a little stomach flu or whatever, and if it's non-COVID, they're fine. So, yeah, go with him. And finally, for our COVID-19 update this week, we got the Las Vegas Raiders defense on the COVID watch list right now because 10 of their players popped positive or was in contact with somebody who had COVID-19 and are on the COVID-19 reserve list. So, I mean, not like anyone's starting that defense anyway, but if you were thinking about it, forget about it because I think 5 of those 10 players are starters, so I'd stay far away from them like I was doing anyway if I were you. No big deal here. That's all I got for you for the injury report this week, guys. Let's move on to my top waiver wire picks of the week. Number 1, Kalen Ballage. He's owned in 51% of leagues right now. Now, this guy's had 2 great weeks where he put up 16 and 15 fantasy points, and he goes against the Jets this week. He looked great versus Miami last week, which is a pretty stout defense, and then had another great game in Week 10 going against Las Vegas. But last week, he rushed 18 times for 68 yards and caught 5 out of 6 passes for 34 yards. So you can see he's used in both the run and pass game. He's versatile. And seems to be picking up on that workhorse role with Justin Jackson now going to IR. So it looks like Justin Herbert has a new haircut and a new running back. Well, at least until Eckler's back. Number 2, I got Sammy Watkins, the number 2 wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's only owned in 44% of leagues right now. I know he's been injured all season, but here he is finally back at practice. I know he's always injured, but he's finally back from that hamstring injury. And he plays Las Vegas this week, who he put up 10 points on the last time they played him. And like I said, there's a bunch of players on that Las Vegas defense who are on the COVID-19 list. And I mean, he's the number 2 receiver in the most explosive offense in the NFL. Why wouldn't you want to go and get that? Just for the upside. His schedule's not too bad going on through the rest of the season. I mean, after this week with Las Vegas, he's got Denver in Week 13, and then he's got the juiciest of all matchups with Atlanta in the championship week. So I'd go get him, while he's still healthy. Number 3, I got Jordan Reed, who's only owned in a laughable 17% of leagues right now. This is another one who I know is very injury prone, guys. So I understand why you want to stay away from him, but the upside's just too much. You got to go and get Jordan Reed right now. I know he's on a bye week, but last week he started pulling away from Ross Dwelly in snaps and routes run. And he's the more versatile of the two, lining up on the outside as well as on the inside. But last week, he put up a decent outing, catching 5 of 6 for 62 yards against New Orleans. But after his bye this week, he has a couple nice matchups. He goes against Buffalo, Washington, and Dallas, who are all pretty good matchups for tight ends. So again, go out and get him while he's healthy. Number 4, I got a wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars who's only owned in 27% of leagues right now. And I don't know how. He's been doing sneakily good right now. Keelan Cole Jr. He has 5 double-digit games on the season. 2 of them are 20-point games. And he also does kick returns, so that's possibilities for touchdowns, like he did last week against Green Bay. And with the rookie Chenault out, he's the clear number 2 there. And if he remains the number 2 for at least the next couple weeks after this matchup with Pittsburgh this week, he goes against Cleveland, Minnesota, and Tennessee, which are some pretty nice matchups. I know Pittsburgh's a little rough, but the rest are good. I'd go out and get myself some Keelan Cole Jr., and he might give you a game or two of double-digit 15, 20 points. And finally, number 5 this week, guys. He's only owned in 30% of leagues right now. Guys, go out and get this guy. Jameis Winston. I know, Mr. 30 and 30. But look, he's capable of throwing 5,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. And 30 interceptions. But still, if you were ever going to play him, it's going to be right now over this stretch. Because this week he's got Atlanta. Next week he has Denver. And then he goes against Atlanta again. Yeah, he'll probably throw a pick. Maybe 2. But I still think he gets you 25 points. Especially this week versus Atlanta. Because with Kamara, Thomas, Sanders, and Cook all in the lineup this week, he's playing with the most talented bunch of players he's ever been with in his career, as well as the best coach he's been in with his career with Sean Payton. So if Breeze is going to be out 2 to 4 weeks, I'm going out and getting this guy if I want to get a guy that has a possibility of putting up 25 points over the next 3. All right, everybody, that'll do it for the waiver wire claims. That'll do it for this episode of the Fantasy Goods. As always, thank you for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, subscribe, leave us a comment. Any questions you guys have on pickups, trades, anything fantasy related, get at us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Fantasy Goods, and we'll do our best to get back to you. But until next time, this was the Fantasy Goods, and we got the goods.